History has a way of whispering warnings, but will anyone listen? Right now, some of the smartest voices in finance, including Ray Dalio, who famously predicted the 2008 crisis, are warning that what's coming could be much deeper.
Right now, we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession. And I'm worried about something worse than a recession.
They're not just talking about a typical slowdown. They're talking about a breakdown of the entire monetary order and real signs that we may already be entering a depression. Nearly a century ago, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 set off a devastating chain reaction, worsening the Great Depression and dismantling global trade. Sounds familiar? A recession is when the economy shrinks for a couple of quarters. It's painful, but temporary. A depression, on the other hand, is a multi-year collapse. It brings massive unemployment, deep declines in production, and a long, drawn-out financial pain. Today, several factors are converging, and each of them would already be dangerous on their own. But together, they create the perfect storm: high inflation and high interest rates at the same time, which is unusual because high interest rates are supposed to slow down spending and borrowing, cooling the economy and bringing inflation down. When both stay high together, it suggests that central banks are losing control. Prices are still rising even though money has gotten more expensive. This points to a deeper structural problem in the economy, where simply raising rates isn't enough to fix the underlying issues.
It wouldn't surprise me that you might start seeing more layoffs, a tick up in the unemployment rate going forward.
Record global debt. Governments and companies borrowed heavily during the years of cheap money. Now, refinancing at higher rates is choking economies.
Panic!
A full-blown trade war between the US and China, with tariff levels matching those that worsened the Great Depression in the 1930s.
Terminate your own tariffs, drop your barriers, don't manipulate your currencies. They manipulate their currencies like nobody can even believe, which is a bad, bad thing and very devastating to us.
Ongoing major wars like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, plus rising tensions in the Middle East. These conflicts disrupt global trade, fuel inflation through higher energy and food prices, shift government spending toward defense instead of growth, and create broader instability that worsens the already fragile economic environment. Political instability in major economies like the US and Europe, making coordinated crisis management harder if things spiral. And it's important to understand, before showing you what else is happening right now, that this crisis didn't come out of nowhere. It has been building for years. Interest rates were kept artificially low for more than a decade, roughly from 2009 to 2022, encouraging excessive borrowing and risky investments. Then, massive money printing during and after the pandemic flooded the system with even more liquidity, fueling bubbles and inflation. Also, economic fundamentals were deprioritized over the past years, shifted focus away from sustaining a healthy economy, prioritizing political agendas like climate initiatives and social movements, over core economic fundamentals like energy stability, industrial competitiveness, and fiscal discipline. All of this created a fragile foundation long before the shocks of 2025 began hitting. This isn't just economic theory, you can see the cracks everywhere. Global growth is slowing sharply. The IMF expects only at about 2.8% growth this year, dangerously close to the threshold that signals a global recession. Germany, Europe's economic powerhouse, is forecasting 0% growth in 2025. China's growth has slowed too, with even some signs of deflation, falling prices that show how weak demand is. Meanwhile, as many are aware of, tariffs are surging, and global trade is forecast to grow at just 1.7% this year, less than half of last year's rate. Recent developments have intensified the unpredictability surrounding US-China trade relations. President Trump asserts that tariff negotiations with China are progressing, yet Beijing refutes these claims, stating no such talks are underway. This discrepancy has sown confusion among global markets and businesses. The lack of clear communication and policy direction is causing companies to delay investments and hiring, fearing unforeseen costs and disruptions. Trade is the lifeblood of global growth. When it chokes, economies everywhere suffer. And behind all of this is the crushing weight of debt. Today, global debt exceeds $100 trillion.
And that's when you have real problems. Now, in the private markets, credit markets, we just talk about a death spiral. And a debt spiral is that part of the cycle when the debtor needs to borrow money in order to pay debt service, and it accelerates, and then everybody sees that and they don't want to hold the debt. That's where we're approaching.
In rich countries, just paying the interest now eats up more of the economy than at any time in the past 20 years. In poorer countries, rising U.S. interest rates are making dollar-denominated loans almost impossible to repay, putting entire economies at risk of default. The U.S. dollar, which for decades has been the anchor of global finance, is now showing clear signs of stress. Typically, when U.S. interest rates rise, the dollar strengthens because higher yields, meaning the returns investors earn from bonds, attract more investment. But today, even as U.S. rates climb, investors are selling both dollars and U.S. government bonds. This signals something deeper, a growing loss of confidence in the U.S. itself. It's not an immediate collapse, but slow and dangerous cracks forming in the trust that has supported the dollar for decades. A major warning sign is how the dollar is behaving compared to interest rate spreads, the gap between yields on U.S. bonds and German bonds, both seen as safe haven assets. Normally, when U.S. yields rise more than Germany's, the dollar strengthens as it becomes more attractive to hold. But right now, even with a wider spread favoring the U.S., the dollar continues to weaken. This unusual divergence shows that investors aren't just comparing returns anymore. They are actively moving away from U.S. assets out of deeper concerns. Hit the subscribe button if you want to know our formula to be prepared for an economic crisis. Meanwhile, everyday people around the world are feeling the squeeze. Even as inflation slows slightly, the cost of living remains brutally high. Food, rent, and utilities cost much more than just a few years ago. U.S. credit card debt hit a record $1.17 trillion in late 2024. Families are stretched thin, often just one emergency away from serious trouble. This merciless cost of living crisis, as Reuters called it, is feeding anxiety, and when people are worried, they spend less, dragging the economy down even faster. There's also a major structural shift happening: deglobalization. For decades, supply chains spanned the globe, but now they are being rewired. Rising political tensions between major economies and national security concerns, like securing technology and critical industries, are forcing companies to rethink their operations. Friendshoring means moving production to allied or politically aligned countries, while reshoring means bringing production back to the home country. These strategies aim to reduce dependence on geopolitical rivals, but they also raise costs, disrupt efficiencies, and make goods more expensive for everyone. Less trade and investment across borders mean lower productivity and slower growth in the future, not just now. Higher costs for companies mean higher prices for consumers, leading to a decline in living standards over time. And on top of everything else, political fragmentation is making crisis management even harder. In countries like the US and across Europe, governments are increasingly divided, and extreme political movements are gaining strength. This means that if the economy deteriorates further, it will be much harder for leaders to agree on fast, coordinated solutions. What is also crucial is that the global monetary system itself is under pressure. The US wanted the dollar to weaken mainly against the Chinese yuan to help correct the huge trade imbalance between the two countries, making American exports cheaper and Chinese goods more expensive. But instead, the dollar is weakening more against other major currencies like the euro and the yen, while staying stable or even rising against the yuan. This mismatch means the US isn't achieving its goal. Instead of leveling the playing field with China, it risks creating further imbalances and losing influence among its key allies. Depending on how leadership, particularly Trump-bent and negotiations with China, handle this moment, the world could either stabilize with a new monetary arrangement or face a more chaotic financial collapse. So far, things have not been going as the economic team supporting Trump's strategy had envisioned. Part of the problem stems from Trump's erratic moves, which are adding confusion and making it harder to deliver the consistent strategic actions needed to stabilize the situation. This is what makes 2025 different. It's not just a normal downturn, it's multiple shocks hitting all at once. Debt, inflation, trade wars, global tensions, political paralysis, and an unstable monetary foundation. Just like in the 1930s, small mistakes now could turn a serious recession into a full-scale depression. And while institutions like the IMF still predict modest growth, they also warn that the risks are firmly to the downside. Some private banks are even more pessimistic, warning of an economic hurricane or megathreats coming together.
Right now, it's kind of sunny. Things are doing fine. Everyone thinks the Fed can handle this. That hurricane is right out there down the road coming our way.
In simple terms, people are financially squeezed, confidence is eroding, debt is overwhelming, trade is slowing, political systems are paralyzed, and now the very structure of the global monetary system is being questioned. That's why some are already saying, it's not just a recession anymore, we are at the very start of something much bigger and much harder to fix. Understanding the warning signs now could be the difference between getting caught off guard and being prepared for the changes ahead. Stay tuned, stay sharp, and as always, stay curious and stay hodling.